in. And then I can't remember if Stuart was going to do a round 3 or not, but we'll listen.
Have you memorized all these too?
I'm going to write that. Start with like staccato.
How's everyone feeling after the video? Yeah, like we're ready to start? My name is Kate Nagel-Caraluzzo. I'm the Executive Director here at Town Hall Seattle. On behalf of Town Hall, Path with Art, and Seattle University, it's my pleasure this evening to welcome you to tonight's presentation, Our Brains on Art, How the Arts Transform Community Health. As we get underway, I'd like to acknowledge that our institution stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for our continuing use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. Tonight's conversation, if we've timed this right, will run about 75 minutes, including Q&A. When we get to the Q&A portion, you can scan the QR code that should be behind me on screen, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can this evening. You can help us by keeping your own question concise and in the form of a question. Town Hall's adding new events to our calendar every single day. So whether this is your first time here or you've been a longtime friend to the organization, we'd love to see you back in the building. And we'd love if you brought someone who doesn't know about us yet to our events or to our rental partners events. Tonight, I'm especially excited to welcome Path with Art as one of our new co-producers on stage. If you've been here before, you've certainly heard me say that it's our job to say yes to ideas, to bring new organizations and new people into this conversation. We're grateful to Path with Art and to Seattle University for being such thoughtful partners in making tonight possible. Town Hall is built on one simple idea, that our community is strongest when everyone has a voice, not just the loudest voices or the ones with power, but every voice and every perspective. In a time that feels more polarized than ever before, we make room for voices that are important. And it might not be a voice that you hear often. It could be an artist, a student, a neighbor, and those perspectives help us see the full picture. So that's what tonight is about, lifting up perspectives and remembering that community health includes the health of our voices together. As you settle in this evening, I invite you to hold on to that idea that community isn't just about being in the same room, it's about making sure that every person has a voice and that we can share that space with curiosity. Everything we do here at Town Hall and across the arts and culture ecosystem is made possible through the support of our members, our donors, and our patrons. If you'll join me in a round of applause for Town Hall members, Path with Art donors, and the Seattle University community. There's professors, student, and alum in the house tonight, so thank you all for being here. You make it all possible. And now I'm delighted to introduce you to Brian Harlan, who's the first dean of Cornish College of the Arts at Seattle University. Please join me in welcoming Brian.
Hi, everybody. I am delighted to be here this evening. Thanks for being here. I'm happy to be representing Cornish College of the Arts and Seattle University, and as well as our partnership with this really amazing organization, Path with Art. So I have just one message, one simple message for you this evening, and it's something you know already, so it'll be easy to remember. And that's this. Here's my message. Art is important. Right? Thank you. One more time for the people in the back. Art is important. So art is important, right? It's incredibly important. Not only to us in this room now, here tonight, but to everybody, everywhere, at all times in the history of this planet. It's kind of incredible, right? There are artifacts, and I'm sure you probably know this. I'm speaking to my tribe here, so I recognize you probably know these things, but there's a bone flute that was found in Slovenia that's 50,000 years old. There's cave art in Spain that is 60,000 years old. I mean, think about that for a second. We only started farming 10,000 years ago. You know, it's only 2025, for Pete's sake. So this is a long time ago, and based on the location and the age of these artifacts, what's really fascinating is they're probably not done by Homo sapiens. They're probably done by an earlier species, human species, maybe Neanderthal or maybe Homo ergaster, but that's kind of incredible. So what's happening? Is it evolutionary trait? Did we learn it from them? This is pretty wild stuff. But I want to say that I'm really pleased to be a member of the Cornish community, because Nellie Cornish was an incredible woman who started the college that we now have over 110 years ago. And when she started the college, her sort of vision for arts education was not what we think of today in terms of, we're very much heavy on career preparation and vocational training, which is, social mobility, which is a really important aspect of higher education. And you might even think, okay, was Nellie irresponsible in some ways? But her vision of art education was quite different, and it was really about the power of the arts and what the arts can do. And rather than try to summarize it, I just wanted to read a quote of how she described her approach to art education. She said this is from her autobiography. In our approach, the function of the creative spirit in education is recognized not as imitation or invention, but as the spontaneous expression of the inner urge of intuition, making it possible to lead the student to discover and organize themselves, to develop their spiritual and intellectual qualities, thereby better fitting them to take their place in whatever sphere they choose. When I read that, and my interpretation of that is it's almost like a call to action, and I actually think that many of our faculty feel the same way. It's a call to think about the power of the arts and what the arts can do for us. And if it is true that there is some relationship between evolution and the arts, if the arts are maybe even somehow guiding our evolution, and that has been true in the past, that could be true in the future. And if we can figure out how to harness the power of the arts, we might be able to lead our future into the future that we want, into the individual health, the social health, the community health, the pro-social aspects of the arts that we all know and love, and even with the environment, and create the world that we want to have. So that is my simple message for tonight. I told you it would be easy to remember. And now I would like to bring to the stage my friend James Miles. And James is both the Chief Strategy Officer at Path with Art, as well as an assistant professor in arts leadership at Seattle University. So James, are you back there somewhere? Okay.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Good. Can we give it one more time for the Path with Art band? That was great. So my name is James Miles, he, him. I'm also called the Fresh Professor, the Fancy Dresser. Expect the best and nothing lesser. As Brian said, I'm lucky to be part of both organizations here tonight, and having spoken at Town Hall before. I'm an assistant professor at Seattle University, teaching in the MFA Arts Leadership Program and the MBA Sports and Entertainment Management Program. Both degrees come together to make Seattle and the region a better place through things we enjoy and experience. It's, as Brian said, art is important, right? It's what we do. We have seen firsthand how art makes society better. I'm also blessed to be the Chief Strategy Officer at Path with Art. And at Path with Art, we use art as a remedy to support individual health and advance public health and recovery. Since 2008, we've been around empowering people to make art. And while making art, they remake themselves. Having served thousands of individuals over 17 years, those that have experienced homelessness, PTSD, addiction, gender-based violence, marginalization, and more, we've seen the impact of arts engagement and arts programming on their lives, supporting sense of belonging, reducing isolation, and increasing sense of purpose. We had an amazing collaboration with Johns Hopkins International Arts and Mind Lab to examine the effects of Path with Art on mental health, self-efficacy, and social connectedness. In fact, that's why we're here today. A published study is coming out very soon showing statistically significant data that shows the positive impact of Path with Arts programming. And put your hands together for that, please. Now, I very rarely get nervous, but I'm nervous now because I'm going to introduce someone that's really dope. She's our dynamic guest of honor, Susan Magsamen, co-authored the New York Times bestselling book, Your Brain on Art, also the co-director of the Aspen Institute Neuroarts Blueprint. She will discuss how the emerging field of neuroarts is transforming the arts landscape and the health landscape for a human to approach humanity and well-being, right? From reducing the need for pain medication, to lowering cortisol levels, stress levels, to improving memory, communication, and behavioral skills, the arts are proving to be a vital tool in making our world a better place. But before we do that, I do want to bring back Stuart and Randy to the stage, because this is what I'm nervous about also. We're going to do a little sing-along. Yeah. So the lyrics will be displayed behind me. We all know this song. We all love this song. If you're not singing, I'm going to be upset. Okay. Blackbirds sitting on the dead of night. Everyone, take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life, you were only waiting for this moment to realize. Blackbirds singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see. All your life, you were only waiting for this moment to free. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly, into the night of the dinner black sky. Okay, everyone, bird sounds. Yes, let's hear it. Love this. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly, into the night of the black night. Singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life, you were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Randy.
Phew, my heart is full. Thank you. That was so beautiful. I feel like I went to church. Thank you so much. Really an honor. So let's see. Do you want to try to pull up my slides? Yay. Technology, it's a wonderful thing. So I'd like to start by maybe just sharing with you what was happening when we just sang. So if you think about it, we are such amazing creatures. And as the group was playing and James was singing, their parasympathetic nervous system was activated. Their brains were flooded with neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. And they actually turned off the part of their brain in the prefrontal cortex that's judgmental and allowed them to tune into the part of their brain that allowed them to move into flow. So what was happening to you? Sound vibrations reached you in just 3 milliseconds, and your brain was flooded with neurotransmitters as well. And at the same time, your cortisol started to lower. And cortisol is that stress hormone that really kind of keeps you agitated. And because we all were listening to the same sounds, you entrained to the beat of the music, actually activating things like alpha and beta waves. And then what I think maybe is the best thing is that when we were singing together, we were actually having our neurons fire together, and we were correlating to rhythm and beat, and we synchronized with each other, and we experienced similar emotions. And if by chance you were in awe or you felt a sense of wonder, you actually are now more empathetic to each other. And that's the power of something as simple as singing a song together. So that just really just blows my mind. So thank you for singing with us together. So this is my grandmother. This is Granny. She lived to be 100 years old. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself just to start our conversation together. I come from a family of makers. My grandmother started knitting when she was a very young girl. She crocheted, she darned, she quilted. But when she was 10 years old, her sister, twin sister, died of appendix bursting. And my grandmother started knitting in earnest. And over her lifetime, the story is that she knitted 35,000 pairs of granny slippers. And what she did was knit together her life, knit together her sorrow, knit together what was happening for her. And she also knitted in wars, she knitted in illness. She knitted through joyful moments, and she also knitted through celebrations. And she used to bring green trash bags full of granny slippers to all of our homes, and we'd give them out to everybody we knew. So towards the end of her life, we actually created a granny slipper book that people all over the world signed. It was epic. It was really amazing. So this is my twin sister. I'm a twin too, Sandra. And when she was 12, she had a farming accident that almost took her leg. And it was a trauma. We didn't know that word a million years ago, but she was traumatized. And the part of her brain called the Broca region shut down, which literally meant she could not talk about what was happening. And so if you know twins, if you are a twin, you know that there is a telepathy between twins that allow us to read each other's minds. If my stomach hurts, normally she's got something going on, or we're so connected. But when this happened, we couldn't connect anymore. And my mother suggested that my sister start to draw, not because my mother knew anything about the way the arts could heal, but my sister was bored and she couldn't really talk about what was happening. And as she started to draw, she was able to create symbols and metaphors about what was happening to her, and was able to put together a story, a narrative about what she was feeling. She couldn't find the words for it, but she could find the feelings and express them in these visual systems. And so for me, that was the moment in my life when I realized that words are probably the least effective way we communicate who we are and how we feel. And it was really that moment where I started to really see the world in a different place. So as we talk tonight for a little bit, what I'd love to have you do is think about, has there been a moment in your life where the arts or aesthetic experience, that could be nature, it could be birds, it could be anything that you can remember from the time you were small, or even just today, where an art or aesthetic experience has really made a difference in your life, in the life of your family, in the life of your friends. And I think you'll see that if you look for it, it's right in front of you, right before your very eyes. I'm just going to show this slide really fast. I was moving some stuff. We moved out of our house recently. And this was my very first camp that I ran in 1983, called the Cloister Summer Chautauqua. And you can't really see it, but if you look around here, it says expressive arts, instrument making, singing, dancing. So all to say that I've been doing this for a really long time. And I love it. And I'm passionate about the way the arts change us. I started a couple companies between 1983 and 2004. And in 2004, I was asked to join the Johns Hopkins faculty in the School of Education. I was very interested in learning in the arts, and not so much in education, but how we learn through the arts. And that was really a wonderful experience. But I was then asked to come to the School of Medicine because we had a donor who wanted to give Hopkins $100 million. But they had one stipulation: they need to study the arts. And so for you deans in the audience who are in medical schools or working in systems that the arts don't show up every day, our dean scratched his head and said, I have no idea what she's talking about. And, but there's this woman up in the School of Education that's doing something with arts and learning. And so I met Marilyn Peterson, and she has been my colleague and co-founder of the Arts and Mind Lab since 2006. And we have been on this journey together to really understand how the arts work and how we can use them in service of humanity. So just a couple things. My lab works in 4 major areas. One is in research, in field building, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, community building, and then also in education and outreach. And in 2016, I started to see all over the world that people were talking about arts and learning, arts and public health, arts and health. It was showing up in disaster relief, it was showing up in healthcare, it was just showing up. And so I was invited to meet with the Aspen Institute, who are just fantastic global conveners, and their mission is really about the marriage of arts and sciences to solve big problems in the world. And so we went on a 5-year journey to really listen to people all over the world, what was happening that we were trying to understand. And what we really came to was that the world was ripe for really bringing arts and arts experiences and arts innovation and interventions forward in a much more meaningful way. So the North Star of the Neuroarts Blueprint is to ensure that the arts and the use of arts in all of its many forms become part of mainstream medicine, public health, and society at large. And it's a really audacious vision that will not happen in the next 5 years, but I think in the next 5, 10 years, we will see this happen. And it's already the work that we've done over the last 5 years, I think gives me a lot of hope. But the blueprint is based on 5 core recommendations. And I just want to talk about them briefly. The first is to strengthen the research foundation of the neuroarts. The second is to honor and support the many arts practices that promote health and well-being, and there are many, many, many practices across the spectrum of disciplines. To expand and enrich educational and career pathways, to advocate for sustainable funding, and to promote effective policies. And look, policy happens everywhere. Policies happen in your family. Policies happen in school. They happen in your community. They happen in faith-based organizations. So policy is a really interesting kind of lever to push. And then ultimately to build capacity leadership and communication strategies within the fields that are coming together, but also with the general public, bottom up, top down, sort of sides in. So we started the blueprint in 2017, And in 2019, I was asked to come to an event with my now co-author, Ivy Ross, who is the vice president of Google hardware development. She's a designer and an artist, and she'd asked me to come and talk about some of the work that we were doing at her home in Mill Valley. And at the end of that conversation, I realized that the work that we were doing with the blueprint was going to take a long time, but we really had the knowledge and the research and the case studies to begin to start to share this work more broadly as we are trying to really build a field. So we interviewed over 120 people. We have now been reprinted in over 12 languages around the world. We have been cited in many papers, and the book has really had phenomenal success globally. I think what the book does for people is validate their own lived experiences. It gives people permission to make art again. For many of us, we stopped making art when we were about 8 years old, when someone said, "You're not good at it," and we were like, "Oh, well, then I shouldn't do it." And I think it also has put words to what we intuitively already knew. And so the book is being used in policy discussions, in curriculum development. It's being used for HR programs. It's rethinking architecture and design, and creating new policies in healthcare and in public health. But I believe the biggest thing that the book is doing is that it is tapping into a hunger that we've had for something more and something different to really help us really amplify the lives that we're living. And so the book makes a bold claim that we're standing on the verge of a cultural shift in which the arts can deliver potent, accessible, proven health and well-being solutions to billions of people. That's a big idea. And we really think that that's true. I just want to define, when I talk about the arts, I'm talking about creative expression. And so there are many, many, many forms of creative expression, and they're being created all the time with technology and just the way we have this ability to be able to bring new ideas into the world and to actually birth new ideas. This is a visual data visualization that I really like, that just kind of gives you this idea of all the different modalities and cultural inferences and ways that we can think about it. It's almost like a periodic table with endless possibilities and combinations. But I loved how the dean spoke about, we've been doing this for a really long time. And in working on the book, it made Ivy and I think more deeply about the role the arts played over history and with indigenous cultures. And there are still over 5,000 tribes around the world that are using art every day for rituals and traditions and how they live their daily lives. And what's fascinating about this is that they don't have a word for art because it just is. And I think, you know, when you think about that, it's pretty extraordinary that it's a knowing, it's a way of being, not something that gets commoditized and thought about as something that has an object or an endpoint, but it's so much about process. This is an image that is a story cloth from a program that I'm doing research with now called Common Threads Project. And the project works with women, young women mostly all over the world, who have been sex trafficked or abused, but in some way have experienced trauma. And what I wanted to share with this is that when you look at this image, which was most recently created, and the images from 10,000 years ago in Bulgaria, you can see there's still the same stories are being told. There are homes, there are traumas, there are families, there's vegetation, there's animals, there's often mountains and clouds, and sometimes there's rainbows. And so we are storytellers, and I think this work through some of the visual art pieces here really tells that the thing that we need to do is tell our stories and to visually create in many, many ways. This is another piece by a geologist named David Zhang from Tibet, and this piece is believed to be 226,000 years old. And what I want to say about this is that if you look closely, you can see the hands that are sort of pictographed into this rock. And you can't forget that these are the things that we use to make our world. We need our hands. We need to be able to make and to do and to move through the world in that way. And so we humans have always been makers and beholders. And in writing the book, I had the opportunity to meet with E.O. Wilson, the evolutionary biologist from Harvard, who basically believes that the arts and aesthetic experiences were the gateways to transformation and transcendence, and that they are the essential ingredients for our human species to evolve at all. And so I think, in other words, what I'm saying here is that the arts are our birthright, literally our birthright, and we're wired for them. So this is a quote from Jill Bolte Taylor. Most of us think of ourselves as thinking creatures that feel, but we're actually feeling creatures that think. When you think about it, it's pretty amazing, right? You know, we only use about 5% of our consciousness. Everything else sits below our consciousness, yet we somehow think that we are thinking our way through. But most of our experiences lie in physical, emotional, sensorial experiences that actually are below our actual thinking. And the only way that you can experience the world is by bringing them through our senses. And so I want to just share a couple of fun facts about our senses. This could be an entire talk because our senses are so amazingly cool. But your eyes process over 24,000 images in an hour. Over your lifetime, you'll process over 10 million images. Touch is an extraordinary sense. Each of your feet have over 200,000 touch receptors. Each of your fingers have over 3,000 touch receptors. Your body has over 4 million touch receptors. And your touch receptors go through your somatosensory cortex by way of the spinal cord and the thalamus. And they release things and hormones like oxytocin and other types of hormones that really are feel-good hormones. And so, you know, it makes sense that when you're holding a child's hand or you're in a situation where you're touching something that is familiar, that it gives you that great comfort and that sense of connection. Smell is the oldest human evolutionary sense, and it evokes the most salient memories. So, you know, think of the cookies that maybe your mom made when you were a child, or a meal that you remember that was very special. Smell is so salient, and it's such a powerful elixir for really memory, both recall and laying down memories. And your nose can detect 1 trillion odors and has over 400 types of scent receptors. And what's interesting about that is they turn over every 30 to 60 days. So you are constantly renewing these sense receptors to make you really be able to experience the world in such amazing ways. Hearing is registered immediately, as I mentioned earlier, in 3 milliseconds. And in part, that's because you're 60% water, 60% or more water, and sound vibrates through us. So I want to just talk a little bit about what neuroaesthetics is. And while philosophers, artists, and children have always known the power of the arts, it's really only been in the last 30 years that we've been able to non-invasively get inside our heads to study the extraordinary way the arts impact us. And now data science and AI is actually accelerating that. So when I talk about neuroaesthetics, it's happening at the intersection of art, health, science, and technology. And it brings together these 3 basic areas: the arts, technology, health, medicine, and science. And this is really a rigorous research discipline that's really getting at the heart of how we're actually wired for the arts. And this is just an interesting graph by Anjan Chatterjee that shows how rapid the literature, peer-reviewed literature, has been, not in the last 50 years, but in the last 10 years. And what we're seeing is that this research is really skyrocketing in all different art forms against all different kinds of health issues, social issues, to really learning issues, to really help us really understand how to use the arts in service of us. An interesting thing that NIH has really been doing is looking really deeply at what are the other systems that are involved in the way the arts affect us. And what we now know is that the arts simultaneously alter a complex physiological network of interconnected systems, both neurological and biological systems, from things like your respiratory system, your cardiovascular system, your muscular system, your immune system. And what's really amazing about that is they're working together at the same time. So the brain and body are actually working together, and there really are no other modalities that have that kind of impact. So in other words, what we're really discovering is that the arts are a super powerful neuromodulator for so many things that we need. So I want to just talk briefly about what's happening when we are in an art experience. And you know, as I mentioned, the way the arts and aesthetics move through our bodies or come into our bodies is through our senses. But they connect at a synaptic level. And this work is called neuroplasticity. So each of us are born with about, some people say 86 billion neurons, I say 100 billion neurons, but they connect at a synaptic level. And you have quadrillions of connections in your brain that create these endless neural pathways. So these neural pathways underlie everything you do, your body movements, your emotions, your memories. Basically, they're always growing and changing depending upon the experiences that you're having. So when you're making a memory or you're learning something, you're actually making some of these synaptic connections stronger, and some are getting weaker through the saliency of your experiences. And what I think is also really interesting is that not all experiences are salient. Our brains have this amazing ability to do something that allows us to only process the information that's coming into our brains and bodies that is important to you, either because it's practical or because it's emotional. So this is an image from Greg Dunn, who is a neuroscientist and an artist. And what I love here is that he beautifully depicts the complexity and the integration of brain systems and structures and functions. And so I mentioned earlier that neuroaesthetics is really a translational field. And when you start to look at the core neurobiology and the mechanisms that are involved, it's really essential to think of these as connected systems. So you can see things like sensory systems and mechanisms, neuroplasticity, reward systems, this idea around saliency and what memories you actually create, but also the default mode network, which is a really interesting system, which is where you mind wander and you daydream, you decide what you think is important to you. And then, of course, the mind-body connection, how these things all work together. So neuroaesthetics is the science. Neuroarts is the field. And we are literally creating a brand new field that's never happened before. It's really coming into view right before our very eyes. And we're at the beginning of this field, but with great potential. So if you think about new fields in science, neuroscience is really only about 100 years old. Women's health is another new field. You think about climate change, a field that's only emerged really as a serious field over the last 20, 25 years, and even bioethics. And so we make the argument that the arts are a health behavior, like good nutrition, sleep, exercise, and they have unique health and well-being benefits, unlike anything else. So the definition for neuroarts is an interdisciplinary field rooted in the science of neuroaesthetics and ways of knowing, which explore how the arts and aesthetic experiences change our brain, body, and behavior, and how this knowledge is translated and applied to advance health, well-being across society. But, you know, while we've talked about neuroscience and about basic science, very early on we knew that the arts could not be reduced to a single cell or to a single biological system, and we needed a new framework. And this has resulted in what I call ways of knowing. So there are many ways of knowing. Basic science for sure, academic, social sciences for sure, but ancestral knowledge and indigenous knowledge lived experience. We each know so much. We bring so much to a situation. How can that be part of a solution? And then, of course, artistic practice and artistic solutions. So it's really through this lens that what Neuroarts is really what I consider to be solution science. I love this image. You know, the elephant in the room for me related to Neuroarts is that the arts are ancient. And they're powerful. They're so powerful, just like the elephant. But secondarily, when you touch a different part of the elephant, depending upon the purpose of the art form and what you're trying to use it for, you're going to get a different result. And then the third thing that I think is so important about the elephant is that it represents a cautionary tale. If we don't nurture and protect the arts, we're going to lose them. And we've seen that in schools letting the arts go. We've seen it in so many ways where the arts have been marginalized and undervalued. So the good news is the arts are showing up and being deployed in every sector in society. And the momentum is growing exponentially. And that's good news because there's a lot of need that really needs to be addressed. These are just some of the things that we're seeing happening in the world right now. But the point I want to make here is that Neuroarts holds the promise of humanizing medicine, democratizing healthcare, improving public health, and transforming education. And I said this earlier tonight, but the reason that is so true is that they're accessible, they're immediate, and they're affordable. And they work for prevention, for practice, and for intervention. And a couple things that I think are also really helpful to understand is that making and beholding the arts is not dependent on age, ability, race, or income. And perhaps the best news is that you don't have to be good at it to be have significant impact in how the arts really help you in any of the areas that you're interested in. So the truth is that many of us are really living in these ultra-processed, fast-paced environments. You know, we've thought that optimizing for productivity would make us happy, but it really hasn't. And the arts are actually now providing healthy and joyful ways to move forward through science-based and rigorous evidence-based practices. And I just want to share a couple of those. The first is looking at child development. We now know that early childhood development and the arts have significant impact on developing really strong neural pathways. We also know that in a recent multi-country study in Scandinavia, the impact of moms singing with their babies actually showed significant reduction in postpartum depression, resulting in the reduction of antidepressant medications. And there's many examples of the way the arts really enhance child development. In something like neurodegeneration, we are seeing that dance improves gait, sleep, mood, cognition. It also lowers feelings of loneliness and enhances belonging. And interestingly, this is the Mark Morris Dance Company that during COVID, they decided to take the work online. And what they found in 28 countries, people danced more often. They actually had better results. They actually stayed off some of the decline of some of the physiological symptoms. And so we're starting to study more and more like medication, the idea around dose and dosage, which is a really interesting area to start to think about the arts as medicine. In dementia and Alzheimer's, we're now seeing tremendous shifts in the way we're using singing and music and even listening to music. My lab and others have done some work with economic analyses, and one art experience a month with people with dementia has a 3-to-1 return on the investment made for dementia patients. We're also seeing when you compound that around what's called true value economics, we're seeing a $5 billion savings to our country when just 20% of people with Alzheimer's have one music intervention a month. So we can talk more about this later, I hope, but I think what's important to say is that this is not only physiologically valid, it also has huge implications for society and where we choose to spend our money and how we can reinvest in other kinds of things when we think about valid kinds of interventions that work. Talking about chronic pain, we're seeing this happen. FDA is approving breakthrough technologies, and these are low-cost, non-invasive complementary treatments that are really significantly effective. PTSD and trauma, we're seeing people like the VA and the DoD use arts interventions to really help lower activations of the amygdala through mixed modal kinds of art activities. And this work that the DoD is doing is now being moved into disaster relief and even into the justice system. So one of the things that we've learned with this work at the DoD is that just 45 minutes of an art experience, and again, you don't have to be good at it, can lower stress by 25%. This is a really great project David Byrne did at the end of COVID. And the idea here was called Social Distance Dance Club. And the idea here was to really see what happened when people came together. They were 6 feet apart, right? But community was instantly created through dance and movement, triggering this idea around the social brain connecting, not unlike what we just did with singing. And just one more when you think about burnout. This is a program called Chromosonics in Venice, California. And what they do is you hear color and you see sound. And the result is a radical sense of presence in just 15 minutes. And this kind of interactive experience is showing up in malls, in libraries, in museums, for just a 15-minute relief to maybe a stressful day. So I'm just scratching the surface on the diverse examples of neuroarts research and practices. But I think the important thing I want to say here is that neuroarts is not an unrealistic idea or a pipe dream. It's a global movement. And in Seattle, it's being led by Path with Art. And yeah. I've had the opportunity to collaborate with Path with Art and their patient artists over the last year. And I want to share just some of the findings that we've learned. We will be publishing a paper in the next couple of months on this, and it's really profound, and it's significant because in doing a literature review for this work, what we saw was there was very little effort being put in understanding the participating artists and from all of these different communities that are coming to Path with Art. And so in this year-long study, we worked with over 100 participants. They did self-reported pre- and post surveys and exit surveys with mixed methods art experiences. So just to give you a little bit of information about this, participation in the arts-based interventions improved several key outcomes related to trauma. And that includes social cohesion and social connection, self-efficacy, and also mental well-being. And when you think about that, these are the tools, these are the skills that we need for all of us to function, and to see these types of improvements in a relatively short time, it was really quite extraordinary. We did pre- and post survey results, and what we saw were some really interesting findings in a significant increase in mental well-being. In self-efficacy, we saw a very significant increase. And fascinatingly, we saw a decrease in loneliness. Now, think about that. Loneliness is an epidemic, and to be able to use an art experience to reduce the effects of loneliness and feel a sense of belonging is again, quite extraordinary. In the exit survey, we looked at a couple of different things. We wanted to understand, okay, they reported, yes, they had these changes, but at what level? And out of 103 folks in our survey, we had a 90.3% improved self-efficacy. That's incredible. We had an 88.3 increase in improved mental health. We had an 80.6 decrease or reduction in loneliness, and improved social cohesion and connectedness by 69% in a year, in 1 year, in coming to classes to do art with each other. And, you know, these are the kinds of results that you don't see in most trials. And so it's very promising data, and we're really excited to be able to think about how we might move it forward. There are 5 areas that sort of emerged as areas that were really important to the participants. The first was social connection and community. That was number 1. The second was a sense of social and emotional well-being. The third, personal growth and empowerment. How am I changing and how am I relating to the world? The fourth was motivation and purpose. And then the last was creative and educational enrichment. And I just want to share with you some of the things that folks said about their experiences. And what's important here is that participants emphasized that community, connection, and a safe, inclusive environment were central to their recovery, that classes offered meaningful social interactions and a sense of belonging that actually reduced their sense of isolation. In looking at mental and emotional well-being, participants described Path with Art classes as powerful tools for negotiating trauma and mental health challenges, saying that the classes supported emotional processing, healing, and hope. And in looking at creative and educational enrichments, participants viewed Path with Art as a space for creative exploration and artistic growth. Many participants mentioned that they could build skills, focus on learning and experimentation, and enhance their own creative voices. It's really beautiful work. Participants here in personal growth and empowerment said that they felt the involvement with Path of Art focused them and helped them foster confidence, self-efficacy, and personal growth, with creative achievements sparking resilience, self-compassion, and a renewed sense of purpose. And classes were described as life-changing and empowering. And finally, Path with Art classes were described as a vital source of structure, stability, and purpose in participants' lives. And they said they offered them a consistent routine, which helped them to find motivation, meaning, and a renewed sense of self-worth. All of these things lead us to what we call whole health, right? So the implications for this work are really significant for practice. And just a couple of quick things here. I think when we're looking at how we bring this work forward in community arts and mental health services, and how we integrate the arts into trauma-informed care, looking at how we can approach and improve mental health, self-efficacy, and connections across all kinds of sectors. And then looking at the benefits that occur outside of formal clinical settings and extending beyond traditional kinds of care. And I think this work offers this flexible, low-threshold, culturally responsive work for trauma-affected populations. And there's a whole host of implications for policy as well. And I think maybe we'll talk about those as we have a little bit of a conversation together. But I want to say that we're now starting to look at some ways that we can expand this research to look at longitudinal studies, at looking at referral partners and the impact on these kinds of assessments, and even looking at group work or individual work, or looking at recovery models. So there's a lot of ways that we can build on the work that we've already done to just continue to add to the knowledge on how to make this sustainable. So finally, as I close, you might be thinking, well, how do I bring this into my life? And I thought I'd just share, in the book we talk about something called the aesthetic mindset. And these are 4 things that each of us can do every day to really enhance the arts and aesthetic experiences in our lives. And the first one is curiosity, is paying attention to what gets your attention. The second is what I call playful exploration. And this means playing around, but not with an intended purpose. And if you really think about it, how many of us don't just have a work list that we have to get something done, but we're not really playing. We're not really open to what might come our way. And sometimes that limits us to what's possible. So this idea of playful exploration. The third is to really zone in to your sensorial experiences. What's the temperature in the room? What are you smelling? How does it feel when you hold your child's hand or have a hug. How are those sensorial experiences really impacting your body, and how are you feeling them? Not how you're thinking about them, but how are you feeling them? And the last is being intentional as a maker and as a beholder. And I think life is really an improv. So how do you move back and forth between those? How do you sing in the shower? I dance on Friday night. Take a walk. But listen to your favorite music. Find ways to, I call it microdosing the arts. And I think when you do that, your world changes. So in closing, this is one of my favorite quotes. Art is our one true global language. It speaks to our need to reveal, heal, and transform. It transcends our ordinary lives and lets us imagine what is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I have no idea where you were on time either because I was riveted.
I love her.
For those of you who do not know me, I am Holly Jacobson, and I work at Path with Art. I'm lucky enough to work at Path with Art. And I want to thank you, Susan, for coming to our Emerald City. We're really lucky to have...
It's a great city.
It's a great city.
It's a great city.
Yeah. I think Town Hall, bless Town Hall for hosting us here tonight and for, as Kate said, lifting up voices that sometimes don't get a chance to be seen, and that's very similar to the work that we do. But I'm just going to ask Susan a couple of questions, and before we open it up to the rest of you. But one of the things that I was curious about was, this is one of the first questions I asked Susan after the study concluded, and that was, so much work has been done, and we were so lucky to be working with you and your fabulous team, but what stood out to you that was different with the research with Path with Art versus other studies that you've done? Because you've done a lot of studies.
Well, this study was really close to my team's heart. I think the community that you've created and the program that you've put together is so intentional. And I think right from the beginning, you could feel that there was transformation and there was something really special happening. And I think as we started to get into it, what we saw firsthand was that the arts experiences that you were providing and the space that you were, enriched environment that you were creating was actually creating health behaviors. And health behaviors lead to habits, and habits lead to decision-making, and decision-making changes your life. And so I think the potential of what you do to really create these new whole health behaviors is, it has such great potential. And I think the idea that when you can help someone who's interested in the arts as a participating artist find their voice and find those health behaviors, they are bringing so much talent and so much to the community and so much to their families and so much to themselves. And otherwise, I think we're leaving so much potential behind, and I think you're doing that in such amazing ways. And to be able to document and validate that through the work that we did, I think really starts to give you a measure of understanding. And I think it's one of the really important things. And I also think the reason to do the research is because we're always able to, I mentioned dose and dosage. How many times does someone come? How often do they stay? What are the art forms that they do? What are those impacts in other areas of their lives? And so the more we can learn about that, the more we can create programs or train others to do your program in other parts of the city, with other populations, and other parts of the country, to really scale this work. And that's really important.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know, we track recovery issues and dosage, the number of engagements folks have, types of engagements, meaning disciplines, and we do have a really compassionate staff because community and art equal empathy and compassion. So we're really excited about our next study, which, who knows, sky's the limit. Speaking of training, how does Path with Art's model of combining direct service, the practice of what we do, which is at the center of everything that we do, with our new training model that we're launching, our Art Remedy training, set it apart from other organizations?
So I mentioned ways of knowing in the conversation. And when I look at the way that you do direct service, you really use a ways of knowing model where you're using artists' knowledge, you're using academic knowledge, ancestral and indigenous knowledge, and lived experience, both from the staff and from the participating artists that come through. And so you have a tremendous body of knowledge that you are, in essence, a learning laboratory. And the teaching modules that you're beginning to do, I think, are super interesting because I met a guy a couple years ago, Emmanuel Pratt, who runs a art farm in Chicago. And it's extraordinary, like Path with Art. You feel it, right? It's just extraordinary. And I said to him, like, how are you going to scale this? And he's like, well, sometimes small is beautiful. And I was like, what do you mean? Because I'm at Johns Hopkins. I'm like, everything gets bigger. And so he's like, small is beautiful. And I said, well, tell me what you mean. And he said, people come here and they learn from us, or we do a training program. They take it to their community and they make it theirs. And I think that's what your training modules are doing. You're able to scale in culturally appropriate ways, in community-specific ways, by allowing this transfer of knowledge in such a generous way to take what you've learned in your learning laboratory with all these ways of knowing and help other people take it and make it theirs. And then you create this bigger learning community where all these other, smaller entities are doing things, but when you connect the dots, you got a big thing. And that's cool. So I love that.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
My next question is, what would it take for arts engagement to be recognized as a standard of care in health behavior, like exercise or nutrition, at the policy and clinical level?
Well, that is such a great question. It's a loaded question. There are a lot of things that happen in healthcare that we don't know why they work. We don't know how they work. Sometimes they don't work, or sometimes they stop working, but they are part of standard care, right? And I think that the arts have been so misunderstood. They've been seen as a nice to have, they've been seen as a luxury, they've been seen as something that is the first to go. And so I think part of making the arts part of mainstream medicine, public health, and society is to first have the evidence, which we're building. And we're building evidence rapidly in many, many ways. And so there's scientific evidence, there's also the mechanistic evidence, there's outcome evidence. There's also this economic evidence that I think is also extremely important. How do you really think about what this mean in context to other kinds of interventions that exist as complementary and integrative health, for example? And so we are now at a place where we're starting to form policy. And in the next month or so, at a national level, there are caucuses starting to come together to look at how to bring this forward. Neuroarts was just put into the congressional record, which is huge. It means it's a promising health practice that needs more exploration. So you can look at the national level and see, what might be possible. But at the state level, there's a lot of opportunity. And I think at the hyper-local level, there's a huge opportunity to, these communities are already building what I think of as rhizomes to connect to each other. And so even something as basic as looking at social workers using the arts, link workers using the arts, community health providers, faith-based organizations, knowing the knowledge about how the arts changed to begin to start to change the lens on how the arts are being moved. But I think we'll see in the next couple of years this movement solidifying of the arts as a health behavior, because all of those things come together in sort of an alchemy.
So that brings up two questions. One is, would this be a good time to talk about, community neuroarts coalitions? Because you all know that Susan is affiliated with Johns Hopkins and the founding director of the Johns Hopkins International Arts and Mind Lab, and wrote this amazing book. And you touched on the Aspen Institute Neuroarts Blueprint. Do you mind just sharing with us what's happening with the Community Neuroarts Coalition and how we might just have one here?
Sure, and even to go back to your last question, the Neuroarts Blueprint is designed to help build the infrastructure to build the field, where the arts are helping to build health behaviors, but to create the systematic catalytic changes that need to happen in order for the arts to be integrated in all of these different sectors in a sustainable way. And so the blueprint has 3 strategies. I mentioned the 5 recommendations. There's 3 strategies. One is evidence, the second is infrastructure, and the third is community. And within the infrastructure, one of the initiatives that we're working on right now is something called the Community Neuroarts Coalitions. And these are hyper-local community entities that come together, that bring municipality, that bring educators, that bring researchers, that bring community-based arts programs, museums, any institution within a community that comes together to look at solving the problems in their communities through the lens of the arts. And so we've had 3 community arts coalitions happening for 3 years, one in New York City, one in Palm Beach, and one in Kansas City. So we've really kicked the tires on how to activate these communities, and they're community run. They're really incredible. They come together, they decide what are the problems they're solving for, they work at them, they evaluate them, they push that same problem forward or even move on to other kinds of areas. And so we're now in the process of working to identify the next 10 community arts coalitions in the US, and Seattle is one of them, being led by Path with Art. So it's very exciting.
That was a little shameless on my part.
It's really
a little shameless. I guess lastly, I would ask, what is it? Lastly, James, do I have to? Okay. What do you think is the big? There's so much to give us hope, right? And we live in really, I find a lot of. It's hard to feel hope sometimes lately. Anyone feel that way? Like, it's hard to feel hope. So I do know, though, when I dance in my kitchen at night, I feel a lot of hope. When I wake up listening to music and not the news anymore, I feel good, yeah. So we talk about a lot of hope, and we got really excited when I picked you up from the airport about all the things that are happening, and all the things that can happen. But what do you think is the biggest challenge for this sector, this emerging sector?
Well, we are in a really difficult time, and I think there's a tendency to feel that this can never happen, that it's a pipe dream, that, we've been here before. But But I think what's different is we do have the science, and we know there's an art for that. And it happens anywhere, any place, for anybody. And in a fascinating way, technology is actually one of the drivers in helping this really scale at an exponential rate, whether that's because of Zoom or biomarkers or some of the devices that are easily available, making them low cost. And I think that the need is so great. And I think that's really where I see the greatest hope, is that there are literally millions of people around the world in this field, and we're coalescing. So another entity that the Neuroarts Blueprint has launched this year is something called the Neuroarts Resource Center, and it's a virtual watering hole where anybody interested in this work in any way can come. It's free. You can create a profile, and we have had thousands, tens of thousands of people come to the resource center to find each other. So I think we're coalescing, and I think there's real power in coalescing and having that strategy. I'll also say that philanthropy, as the federal government has been cutting grants and pulling back on essential resources and direct care. Hopkins lost 2,000 employees with USAID. Many of them were using different types of interventions to support all kinds of health issues. Philanthropy is really stepping up, and businesses are stepping up, corporations are stepping up, and I think we're seeing, as structures fall, as institutions are falling, there's a huge opportunity. You know, there was so much status quo where you couldn't get in, you couldn't, break in. I think right now we're in a time where it's a jump ball. And if you have, I have a t-shirt that says, be brave and be kind. And if you have the courage to push these new ideas that work, I think we see results. And so I think this is a moment where the door is opening, and I think it's a real opportunity to move through and to do it together.
Yeah. I think the singing tonight really helped illustrate that.
Sing more.
But how the arts bring us together as community, and are the great equalizer, and now can be health equity equalizer as well. So I think James is coming up to see if any of you have questions.
Yes. We have quite a few questions from the audience. I'll try to get through as many as I can. Thank you, Susan. Let's give a round of applause for Susan. So we've talked about the arts at large, and there's one that's going to get really specific. Are there studies showing the efficacy or the differences between different types of art, music, visual arts, and whether creating or experiencing is more valuable or not?
I love that question. That was the very first question that I got after the book came out. Like, should I make or should I behold? And the answer is yes. So when you think about being a maker, and this is actually, I think, a democratizing thing. When you're making, nobody can tell you what to make. It's in your head, it's in your body. You can decide to share it or not share it. It gives you reflection, it gives you introspection, it also ties into the default mode network. It is something that you do and you choose to do, and only you are the only person in the world that's going to make what you make. And there's unbelievable power in that. We saw that in the self-efficacy work that the participant artists experienced, right? And it builds self-confidence, it builds resilience. So being a maker is super important. Whether you ever share it or not, it gives you a different level of insight. When you're a beholder, you can empathize, you can have compassion, you can perspective take, you can do what we did in singing, you can experience someone else's resonance and have that change you. And so there's overlap, certainly, in some of the different neurotransmitters, like the ones we talked about, dopamine and serotonin, even adrenaline. There's similar systems and structures that can be at play. But, for example, in flow states, but they are very different. And so the fourth aesthetic mindset is to be a maker and a beholder, and let yourself sort of bring in and then use what you've brought in to process sort of what you're making. So it's really important to do both.
Love it. You've talked about this in the little reception we had earlier, but when did you start working on the book? And with all the new research that came out and is coming out, how did you know it was complete?
Pardon me?
How did you know your book was complete?
When the publisher said you have to turn it in. Writing this book was an absolute love letter. There was never a moment, not a second, where I didn't love it. It was just like being taken to another world, day after day after day. And, the structure of the book was the structure that Ivy and I came up with before we went out. And the book was auctioned to 5 different publishers. And we were really, no one ever said, change the way you're organizing it. And I think that was something that, we just felt it was the right bones for the book. Mm-hmm. But we could have gone on and on and on and on and on and on and on. The stories are so extraordinary, and there's so many of them. So we tried to pick the best ones that would give almost like a patchwork quilt, a range of different ages, people, experiences that we all could relate to in some way. But we're now working on a PBS series that we're really excited about, that's been greenlit, and they're in the process of raising funds for the production. But the idea is to lift this up in a visual format, which I think is very, very exciting. So, eventually we'll, do a second edition and we'll add more things. But I think there's other ways to share this information besides updating the book. And so I'm really excited about that too.
Great. Glad. There's a couple questions I'm going to try to combine into a question. So there's a question about accessibility in communities amidst increasing segregation, the loss of arts in schools. So this question is, how can art have the greatest impact for social justice or activism?
That's a great question.
Well, maybe I'll come back to this idea about when you're a maker, nobody can tell you what you're going to make. And so when you think about social justice and activism, creating art that really expresses what you're fighting for and what you're trying to lift up, there's nothing like that. And I think that's really important. I have seen art being used in the justice system to help people come to terms with what they're feeling, why they're there, and also when they're coming out, how to enter the world with a new lens. And so I've seen this work be really incredibly valuable in how we think about that. I've also seen it be used for agency and advocacy in mental health. And I'll give you an interesting example of that. For those of us who have or know people that have serious mental illness that are not able to communicate what's happening, and this is a situation where if you don't have bipolar disorder, if you don't have major depression, if you don't have schizophrenia, you can have compassion, but you can't empathize because you can't know what that feels like. And what we've seen is art being used, and this is using AI, with people talking about how they feel. So an example, I saw a piece recently, a young woman who was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, and her family she was losing her family, and she said, I feel like a caged bird where there's tape on my mouth and there's a shade over the cage, and I'm trying to sing, but I can't make a sound. And this piece of art, and I wanted to look like Mondrian, or I wanted to look like Picasso. And an image was created, and she shared it with her family, and it immediately, they understood how she felt. And I think that's a form of advocacy and that the arts can do.
Yeah.
Can I dovetail onto that?
Please, please.
I mean, that's what we see every day, right,
Yes.
James?
Yes.
I used to do voting rights before. Actually, I was on the town hall stage speaking about my voting rights work a long time ago. And I did voting rights to give people who might not have whose rights might be taken away or were at risk. But there's such a similarity with the arts, because the arts give people a voice, and they give people a chance to, as Susan's saying, have that agency. And it has profound effects that we see on the daily, where someone who experienced behavioral, severe mental health, schizophrenia, and started engaging in the arts and stopped being hospitalized, was able to get back control of their lives by coming back to themselves through art making and through connection. So,
Well, I was thinking about racial injustice and the history in our country of slavery, and there's some great work that's been done documenting somatic healing, and that's rocking and humming and moving and to just get through the day. And I think, opening up those somatic channels where trauma has been stuck is also a part of, I think, healing. And, you can look through history and see that very clearly. I have a friend who is an amazing singer, Fred Johnson. He's an art advocate in Tampa. And he was put into an orphanage when he was 5 months old. And all he did was rock and move, and people didn't get it. Then he started to hum, and he all became a very sort of accomplished jazz musician and singer. And what he said was that it was intergenerational for him. It was in his DNA. So this ability to be able to heal ourselves, is part of our physiology.
Yeah. A last question. I think this is an homage to the artist.
wait, can I just, I'm sorry, we're just going to go
Please.
back and forth.
Yes. Okay,
I just
fine.
want you all to know that art is activism.
Yes.
Okay, art is social justice. So we have the power, and it is a voice that we have right now that we need to use. So there you go. Sorry.
All art is political.
I'll also say it's also, in my world, bipartisan. Everybody's got somebody that's got somebody. And I think, when we don't polarize it, that's also a really important thing, too.
Yes. So, final question. Who made the video that we watched earlier?
We did. I did.
You personally?
No, I'm not good at anything. No, actually, last year I gave a talk at Society Neuroscience for 5,000 neuroscientists who came into not a room like this, just a black box in a convention center, and I gave the presidential lecture, and people like the Dalai Lama had given it before me, and I'm like, I'm screwed. And so I was like, we got to do something to get people in the mindset. These are neuroscientists who don't think about this. But the next generation of neuroscientists and young people are the future of this work too. That's another thing I think it's really important to say. So we wanted to create something that created an atmosphere when they came in. They sort of started to kind of maybe move into a different space. So this video is a little longer, but people came in and were sort of mesmerized. And then we had a guy that did improvisational singing with the group, 5,000 neuroscientists. And if that wasn't enough, they all got kazoos, and they learned how to play the kazoo together, which was gorgeous. It was really gorgeous. So that was part of that. And so this video was actually done by Johns Hopkins film department at the School of Medicine.
Oh, great.
And we're happy to share it.
Blake, thank you. I have to say on behalf of Path with Art, Town Hall, Seattle University, thank you.
Thank you.
Give it up for Holly Jacobson and Susan Magsamen.
Thanks, y'all, for being here.